Matt Harrison, how are you? You okay? So we had 10 people waiting because they had to wait for 10 minutes. Because when Josh isn't here, things tend to go wrong.
It's the way of the world.
It's the way of the world. Everyone that's watching on Instagram, then it's not just myself this week. We have special guest. So I'm going to carry on. So if I'm talking, it'll be on me. Jason's talking. I'm going to switch it up and send it that way. So I'm going to have to do some fancy footwork on the Instagram. Everyone watching on YouTube, you've got a much better camera. We're with Jason. So I've got Matt, Anita, Berserk, PK, looking good, sounding good. Yes, Fat Farmer, Dr. Green Tips, growing around. Right, seeing as the early birds are all here, ready and waiting. Big moment. And this is for, I couldn't find the message because I've had a lot of messages since we spoke and I can't remember the Instagram name, but I'm hoping he's going to watch live. He's from Michigan. He owns Sullivan Contracting. And I was too lazy to change my t-shirt today. So he sent Sullivan Contracting long t-shirt, good for the winter. He sent a hoodie, and the hoodie was that good. Jalal opened up the packaging and put it on straight away and refused to give it back to me. So thank you very much, Jalal. Barry's going to have something to say about that. He said, Barry said, you're in his seat.
Keeping it warm for you.
So thank you very much. And there's going to be a moment here. I'm going to do this because it got sent all the way from Michigan. I'm going to do a hat change, a one only hat change for Sullivan Contracting, all the way from Michigan. Let's do this, but let's not take my hat off for too long because people actually don't know what's under this hat.
If there's anything at all.
So if we can do it, so like what we need to do is just, it's best not be a small either, otherwise XL, large to XL. So you ready? Hat change. There we go.
Yeah, that worked out all right.
Was that good? No, you didn't see hat here there, did you?
I didn't. I'm right.
So we are on Sullivan Contracting. A one only special. Thank you very much for sending us. He sent us a warm hoodie, some t-shirts, some caps, just to say thank you for doing the podcast. So it was nice. And all the way from Michigan as well. Yep. It cost them a little bit of money to send. That's what I genuinely appreciate it. Thank you very much for Sullivan Contracting. If you're from Michigan, then if you're not using Sullivan Contracting, you're missing out. His customer service, like I received this 4 or 5 days after he sent the message. So his customer service, we know, is absolutely spot on. Right. Looking for Hope, 1967. Yes. Barry's on the comments. He's back. He's watching. A little bit less love for Barry, please. Because how about a little bit of love for me? Hey, Barry gets all the love. Do you know, Jason? Brian, he works in our shop. He came off his motorbike. It was very scary. He was in intensive care. He had broke 21 bones.
How long ago was that?
It was the end of November.
Oh, what? Just
recently, like 6 weeks ago. And might have been, it's in November somewhere. And he's come off his bike and serious, though, intensive care, 21 broken bones, had the spleen removed. It was heavy. I told everybody, said, listen, Brian's not going to be working for a while. He's in intensive care. He's okay. He's now back on his feet. He was in the shop today, just saying hello. And then I said, and Barry's not here because he's hurt his back. So the comments were coming in saying, how's Barry? How's his back? What's up? I went, whoa, hang on a minute. Brian, let me just reiterate, Brian has broken 21 bones, had his spleen removed, was in intensive care, and everybody was saying, how's Barry? Thank you very much for asking how Barry is, but Brian was my concern. Garden Alchemy, nice to have you with us. Dr. Green Tips. Yes, you have seen that pic without the hat. Let's not bring that up again. That was a slick changeover, though, wasn't it? Trimbag Europe, Pop Weasel, The Devil's Teardrops. Hello. And Matt said, I've literally wondered what's under that hat. So it's actually just nothing but a brain exposed. If I take my cap off for too long, the brain becomes exposed and gets a bit chilly. So, what have we got for you today? We've got a special podcast. We need to get cracking with it because I've been with Jason since 3:00. We've had a drink, a soft drink.
Soft drinks.
I've had me lunch, and I know that this could potentially be a very long podcast, but we're going to get you back because there's lots that Jason can talk about, not just CO2.
Okay.
And so what I'm going to do, first of all, we're with Jason from Titchmarsh.
Hi there.
How are you?
Good.
You good?
Yeah.
So have you
Thanks for having
you
us.
come from Birmingham today?
No, not from Birmingham. It is a beautiful Birmingham accent that I'm sporting. It's born and raised.
Yeah.
But no, we are based actually. I'm here to talk about my gas.
You gas.
Yes, but no, I've come down today from Cardiff, so it's a long drive, 3.5 hours in the car to get here.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Cardiff,
capital of Wales.
Wow.
Beautiful place.
And you didn't even take me up on my lunch offer.
No.
Whoa.
No.
Cardiff,
Just
what a
soldier.
mission. Thank you
Yeah,
very
no
much. Yeah,
worries.
that's like even more special now for making that trip
No
all the way here.
worries. No
Thank you
worries,
very
mate.
much. So, first of all, though, before we start chatting away,
Go on.
we have to, this podcast, we wouldn't be able to do it without our partners. So we have some partners, and the great thing about our partners is they also happen to be amazing companies. That's no coincidence because we wouldn't have partnered up with people that weren't amazing companies. So first off, we have CANNA Nutrients,
Awesome.
the number one CANNA nutrient line
Industry
by
standards.
far in the UK, industry standard, easy to use. If you're not a grower and without hearing about CANNA. So they're just phenomenal. I'm very proud to have them on the podcast as a partner. We have AutoPot watering systems, the number one gravity-fed watering system, but not just the number one gravity-fed watering system. Probably, if Carlsberg did systems, it would probably be an AutoPot. A phenomenal system used all around the world. If you're watching live on YouTube and Instagram, then you will not have had access to the podcast that is going out on Sunday because it wasn't live. It's with Jason from AutoPot, live from Colombia. He's down there doing what he does best, consultant, talking about AutoPots.
Awesome.
He's on his way to the MJ BizCon, which is on right now. And that podcast is out on Sunday. So if you're watching live, then you need to download the podcast and not be lazy and just watch live. You're not really lazy. I love you all. So we have AutoPot. Very grateful to have AutoPot on board. We also have CAN fans and filters, Ice Maxes, Q Maxes, EC and AC, CAN Originals, just one of the industry leading in ventilation, carbon fans. They don't do ducting, but if they did ducting, it'd probably be amazing as well. And we also have SANlight LED, phenomenal LEDs. LEDs are going to have a big thing in 2020. We're doing a big test. We're going to test all LEDs. We're going to use a range of different meters, and I fully expect SANlight to come out.
They've come a long way.
Near the top.
The LEDs have come a long way over the last few years
And
compared to where they were 5 years ago.
And you were interrogating them at the product days, weren't you? We're going to get into that. And we also have Revolution Microelectronics with Greg, the Supremo engineer, low wave frequency ballasts. Bulbs run longer. He does the ceramic metal halide. He does the Avicii, and he does the Revolution Diva 1000-watt double-ended light. So big thank you to all of our partners. And I've got to mention Grow Genius Silica as well, because I've got a bit of a pet. What it is with Grow Genius is we came up with a product called Nano. So we had the Nano Silicon and the Nano Iron.
Okay.
And it wasn't ready for the market. It was too expensive. Phenomenal product. Everyone that used it said it was brilliant, but it was just too expensive. So the market wasn't ready for it, and it was too expensive. It was a powder. So, but there was a lot of kickback to like nanoparticles. It's so dangerous. It can do this. It can do that. What's the benefits? And there was a little bit of kickback from people who had rival companies or a little bit skeptical, or whatever the dance was. They were skeptical. And I know how that feels.
Okay.
When a new product hits the market and it's a market disturbing product, then there's always going to be a bit of kickback. And I've felt that kickback already on behalf of Grow Genius, because silica, my favourite element. It's my favourite element in plant growth. And
Okay.
I just love the silica. So it's in my heart, and I want to help people understand and use and grow genius. It's a 40% monosilicic acid, 19% actual available to the plant, and it's distributed by Highlight Horticulture. And we're going to be doing some tests with it. I want the best.
What does silica do within the plant?
So silica does a lot with it in the plant. That's why it's my favourite. And before we get onto that, because we're gonna get there, Coatsy, we're gonna do the intro now, and the intro goes just right there, Coates. Just here. Go.
All good? Ready to go? Turn my voice up a little bit. Oh, God, for everyone watching, the whole family.
Are you ready to go? Are you built to be in the house that I built, in the booth that I built?
I know people tune in every Sunday to listen, but even when business is good, we still manage to do the podcast. NPK.
So we're back. It's right into the podcast now. It's 199, podcast 199, the importance of CO2 with Jason. And Jason has just asked a question. Silica. What's the importance of silica? Yeah. So the reason it's my favourite is because of how much importance it's got to the plant. It's not one of the 17 essential plant nutrients, so plant doesn't need it to reproduce or get to its end harvest. But what it does is, I call it the insurance policy. It strengthens the cell walls. It prevents the plant from losing too much water if it's hot.
Wow. And
it also helps the plant retain water if it's, or it'll help the plant regulate water if it's too cold. If abiotic and biotic stresses, so it will help with if you have pests come into your room, they will still come onto the plant, but they will find it very hard to pierce the outer layer, the epidermis, I think it's called.
Skin,
and it will find it very hard to pierce it, so they will look for richer or better food sources, so you don't tend to get as many pests. And if you overwater, underwater, overfeed, underfeed, pest and disease, it's basically a shield around the whole plant.
Wow.
My favourite element for plant growth.
How do you apply it?
So you can foliar feed, and that will get directly into the plant through the stomata and through the openings. Mm-hmm. And you'll know about stomata because it's where your CO2 is going to slide in.
That's right.
But most people will root drench it. So you'll feed it with your normal feed. Most people add it first to the water, give it a good mix, allow it to distribute along the water, fully dissolve, and then they will add the A's and B's after they've regulated the pH.
Is it similar to silicon?
So silicon's what you will put around the bath. So it's different chemical properties. So silicon's the white stuff to prevent.
No, but I mean, there are some bottled silicons that I've seen by, what's that? Sumo.
Sumo, so that's a potassium silicate. Potassium silicate. So that's it's silicon attached to potassium. The plant has to do a lot of work to pull the potassium silicate from it. And the amount of silica that the plant can actually get after it's done all that work is a lot less than a monosilicic acid.
Right.
So yeah, they have exactly the same benefits, but the plant has to expend much more of its energy to unlock that silica. And also the real astute growers won't be fans of having to add extra potassium to their already
you're affecting the balance, aren't you?
Yeah. So just to be able to add silica, people having to add potassium. With potassium silicate, it throws your pH sky high. It does,
throws it north.
Yeah, and if you're not on the ball, then it can put you into a bit of trouble with it. Yeah. So that's why silica's my favourite. I'm going to try my best to keep on top of all the comments, but we're going to really get into a good discussion here. Let's just see what everyone's saying. Hi Tweedledee, Green Meanie, MJ Biz is like $1,000 to get into. I'm going to have a word with them. That's ridiculous, but it is the best show in the world. I live in Vegas and would absolutely love to go, but it's just a fortune for tickets. It is. You know what we'll try and do next year? We'll try and, for the people that listen to the podcast, we'll try and sort something out so we can get cheaper tickets or try and get some of you in there. Lee, International UK, Yes Boys, Pete Backgarden, Home Just in Time. and everyone else. PL Grow Systems, Blackburn Hydroponics. I love it when the shops get involved. Absolutely love it. Blackburn Hydroponics. Hello. My mate using GG now, which is Grow Genius, and his plants are looking best they have. Mark BioBiz, Kayla Goodwin. Kayla, I still haven't got over the fact that you said that the best biscuits were lemon cookie biscuits. We had a bit of a discussion on biscuits last week, and Kayla said lemon cookies. I'm still disgusted, to be honest with you. Right, and Garden Alchemy, big up, and hello. Newts and Roots have just joined. So, this could be, I will be getting Jason back next week. No, not next week. Don't panic.
I was going to say shit.
And we didn't talk about this.
What a drive.
So we're going to be getting Jason back next year because we've just been speaking for an hour and a half, non-stop, all kinds. For the first time, I have a pen and pad here.
Okay.
Because you are going to be saying stuff that I want to talk about. And I'm not going to interrupt the flow. So pen and pad, we're all good to go. For everyone that's just joined on Instagram, say hello.
Hey.
Right. So the important stuff, Jason, Titchmarsh, what is it that you do?
Well, we at Titchmarsh, with Titchmarsh Gas, we supply CO2.
Yeah.
Mostly CO2 and CO2 related products. So the CO2 itself, which is a horticultural wonder.
Yeah.
And regulators, controllers, and some fire safety equipment as well. We were born of the hydroponics industry, so we've got a keen eye on what it is that the hydroponics community and the horticultural community at large need, and so that's sort of where our focus is.
Nice. Well, we met for the first time. Thank you to Dan, who was at Hydrogan at the time.
He used to be.
And do you know where he is now?
I think he's at Lumi or something, isn't he?
BioBiz.
That's right. He told me he's at BioBiz.
So I think he was working on Lumi at Hydrogarden.
That's right.
And then he's moved to BioBiz. So congratulations to Dan for the BioBiz. Well done.
Thank you for introducing us as well.
Yeah, thank you. That was a good introduction.
Yes,
so you caught my eye. One, because you're huge and you're an absolute monster. You're sitting down, and thank God, because you're a big dude. But mostly because basically we started off the conversation. You have got your degree in applied physics.
That's right, yeah.
And I was like, okay, what have we got going on now? Applied physics. Let's have a little bit of chat about physics. And we got into that. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on.
Sure.
But then you start talking about CO2. I asked about Titchmarsh, and I said, well, CO2's CO2. You've got a lot of companies that supply CO2, and we were using one. Operative word, we're using one. I said, so other than being a bit cheaper, what sort of stuff do you offer? And Jason hit me up with this, and let me go to his bag of tricks, because everyone watching live, you're in for a bit of a treat. Everyone listening, you will also be in for a treat, because I'm going to bang it down on the table. 2 seconds, please.
You can tell straight away that.
That's awesome. So light.
Yeah.
So I've got my baby with me. Hey, I've got my baby with everyone listening to podcast. This is a 5 food grade carbon dioxide, 5 kilos.
That's right.
And it's boom. There you go. Instagram. So
your new best friend.
My new best friend, CO2. And I'm throwing this about like you don't throw CO2 cylinders about.
You don't. You wouldn't feel confident doing that with a piece of steel in your hand.
We're just going to leave that right there, because I quite like my oxygen. I'm not a plant.
No.
But plants love CO2. So that is the unique selling point. The ease with which you can transport Titchmarsh's CO2.
That's true.
So this was was this the first product that you came out with?
It's our flagship product, yeah. It's, to be honest, when I first started, I would just move other people's gas, basically. And there was problems that I could see for the client base with them using the traditional CO2 cylinders. So we looked at it and had a bit of development talk, and then we worked out that we could produce a cylinder that was lighter when it's full than a steel one is when it's empty.
Yeah.
as I said, we're born of the hydroponics industry. We understand the kind of challenging urban environments that the colleagues are in.
Yeah.
So you want something that you can put in a gym bag, as we did today.
We've just transported 2 up a flight of stairs.
Yeah,
and it was very easy.
That's right. You're not out of breath.
Yeah.
And some urban gardens are in high and low places, so you want something that you can transport easily, discreetly, wherever you need to. And that was one of them.
You are not transporting the traditional CO2 cylinders easily,
in your gym bag. No, you're not.
Definitely
no,
not.
You're not.
They're very heavy.
And you can tell this is full, not just because there's a bit of weight. I don't know.
Ooh.
Did you?
Nice podcast sound.
I don't know if you could hear. I don't know if you could hear the change in pitch.
Yeah.
As I make it horizontal.
Yeah.
So it's a full cylinder, but that weighs about 10 kilos.
Okay.
Which is like a shopping bag with
I'm carrying 4 in me big arms. The reason I didn't get you to pick it up is because it means nothing that you throw a CO2 cylinder everywhere. Mr. Hulk over here. Me, on the other hand, with my little arms, you see me throw it about, and if I can throw it about,
the empty one,
it's
you lift it with a finger or two.
It's
awesome.
Well, the empty one's just here. Jason thought it'd be funny to give me a heart attack before when we put them into the bag and one started going, psst, I shit myself. I thought we were all going to die. And Jason
builds pressure anyway. Even when the valves are cold, just because of how cold CO2 is, when it's there's still always going to be some residue in there. And as you open the thing, the expanded CO2 will come out.
Nice. So
even weeks
for everyone on YouTube, this is my left hand outstretched, fully out. Oh, that's a piece of piss. It's not because it's light, to be honest. It's because I've been going to the gym,
buff,
I've been going to the gym. So the important question about this one is this one of the biggest that you do in this sort of lightness? In
this lightness, yes. But of course, we've got cylinders that are my height.
Yeah.
And they weigh a little more than I do, which is not an easy thing to do. But yeah, so these are we are actually looking at 7 and 10 kilo ones, but we're not doing those yet. This is the flagship product, and it's the easiest to transport for everybody involved. So this is like I say, our flagship, and this is what we really move and maintain. But we do all cylinder sizes, literally all cylinder sizes. So right up to 50 key.
Nice. So for end consumers, where do they get them from yourselves?
They get them from the shops.
Yeah.
Your local stockist, your favorite shop, that's where you can pick them up.
Nice.
If you're
for everybody watching and listening, that's us. But I'm not that big headed to think that it is actually us. So what's some shops that are stocking them up and down the country?
Ooh, well,
okay, that's enough. Thank you very much. Go on.
Well, there's a GrowPro out in Cheltenham.
GrowPro in Cheltenham.
Awesome shop.
Good.
And down south, we're looking at Route to Success.
Yes, good shop.
They've got a reasonable chain and a lock on that area.
Yeah.
They do a really good job down there.
Nice.
But there's there are shops up and down the country, to be honest. And what we do, if you get in touch with us and you can't get it where you are, we'll make sure that it's in one of your local stockists.
Where does the shop have to go to get the CO2? Is it www.titchmarsh.co?
That's it.
And it's TITCHMARSH.
That's it. Like Alan.
So people actually asked if I had if that was the Titchmarsh that was coming, and I said no, I've got something better.
Thank you.
I don't want to talk about daffodils and putting nice rockeries in people's back gardens. No, actually, Alan Titchmarsh, if you're listening, that would be lovely to get you on the podcast. But one of the gardening legends. So I can already see the questions coming in.
Okay.
We're going to go back to your CO2, but the questions are already coming in about the inverted commas shit CO2. So let's get them out, because I've brought a bag of goodies for people watching to see.
Okay.
Let's start with the Exhale CO2 bag. That's for Instagram, YouTube, Now, the Exhale CO2 bags, for people listening on podcast, are bags of mycelium, and that is essentially mushrooms.
Yeah.
When they get warm and light, they will start to respire, and when mycelium respires, it produces CO2. There's a little tab at the top, which do not rip off. You leave it alone. You'll pull the slider from below the tab, which stops it from respiring. You put it above the tab, and then you just leave it ready to go. So the question that I spotted was from Jim Aiden saying, ask Jason about those shitty little bottles that claim to add CO2 but are just yeast and water. So we're going to get another shitty little bottle out, and that's your words, not mine. Okay.
Ooh.
So we have
TNB,
the Enhancer CO2 dispersal canister, and the Enhancer refill. Instagram, there you go. That's for you. And that's another version or bit of CO2 that you can get. I think when he said bottles, that's what he meant. So where was that comment go? They're just yeast and water. So in those bottles is yeast, sugar. That's
the catalyst.
Yeah. Words. I already knew you're bringing the good words because we've had a chat. So you've got the yeast, the sugar, which is the catalyst, and you add lukewarm water, but there's also dark particles in them. If you ever get them out and shake them, there's also very dark particles. Now, it is quite hard to find what they are, but I have been led to believe from a few sources and from reading that they are very small particles of carbon, actual carbon.
Okay.
And what they do is slow the process down. So it's not just you add water, the sugar and yeast combines, gives off a shitload of CO2, and then it's done.
You'd have an energy spike, wouldn't you?
And then it'll tail off. But the carbon sort of slows that reaction down. So it gives you a slow, steady-ish release of CO2. What do I think about them before we move on to Jason? Me and Jason, I know we've got different opinions. We're going to talk. That's what we're going to talk about. Yeah. I've used them. I really like them. But having said that, I didn't do a side-by-side. It's just that when I have used them, the plant has just been phenomenal. And there's also some real key points to mention when I have used them. One, I never, ever, ever hang them above the plant.
Okay.
Even with the Exhale bag, never hang it above the plant. CO2 is heavier than air. It will drop. But guess what's stronger than your CO2 dropping? Extraction.
Yeah.
If you hang them above your plants and you've got a good amount of extraction, that CO2 is just going to go suck straight out through the filter and exhaust it out, and the plants get very, very little benefit. So when I was using them, DWC, we had that podcast last week. When I do DWC, I scrog. So if we're in a 1.5 meter tent, DWC system on the bottom, scrog net on the top, so that there's basically the bottom, the tank is in darkness, and it's a full screen of green leaves. It's lovely.
Okay.
I will put the CO2 bottle, the TMB, or the bag underneath that canopy, right by the stem. And I'll probably do one or two if I'm feeling flash.
Okay.
So I'll put one underneath the canopy. The CO2, as you add water, you shake it, and you'll shake it every day or every other day for 2 weeks, and it will release CO2.
Nice.
So as your extraction pulls the air upwards through the canopy, it will also be bringing the CO2 through it. Yeah, exactly.
Through the leaf.
And the plant just always, every time I've used them, the plant always just seems to do phenomenally well. When I don't use them, or should I say, the weeks before using them, the plant looks good.
Okay.
You put the CO2 bottle in, the TMB, it just seems to get more vigor.
Of course,
greener leaves.
CO2 supercharges the processes.
It's what we breathe air and we use oxygen. Plants take in air, but they use CO2, and that's we're oxygen. There's plants are CO2, and a lot of the mass or a dry weight of a plant, the majority element in the dry weight is carbon.
You're taking the words right out of my mouth.
Sorry.
Never mind. Because, if you were watching Star Trek, because I know there must be a few nerds out here, then they're always looking for carbon-based life forms. And we are carbon-based life forms. So, everything, there's things that I find common to life on Earth. Carbon, sugar, water.
Yeah.
And those are the fundamental building blocks. But as you say, a minimum, I believe, of about 50% of the dry weight of any plant is carbon. Some plants are more, some none are less.
Yeah.
So that at least 50%. So it is vital to them. I'm not really sure how we absorb it. I've never thought about it because I know that there's a lot of carbon in our bodies. But when it comes to plants, we know how they take it up.
Yeah.
And what they use it for.
Yeah. And with the TMB bottles, I've personally seen a difference. What I haven't done is got a CO2 meter and tested how much CO2 actually comes out. I've seen it done in sealed rooms, which is no extraction in, no extraction out, no intake in. It's just a room or a box, and they shake the canisters or they put
Were
the
they
bags
effective in sealed rooms?
Yes, but
could they get it up to the optimum levels?
What I saw was around 800, 900.
It's better than a smack in the mouth.
But we don't operate in a sealed room. Very rarely we operate in a sealed room. The majority of people will have air coming in and extracting out. So I can't rely on that one. All I can say is when I've used them, it's done really well. Okay. And I use the TMB bottles in flour because it will produce more CO2 than the bag will, from what we've seen in those closed rooms.
That's interesting to know, because I couldn't have opined on which one of those was better. I would say that most of the client base that I deal with are moving from these to something else, because and it's been good talking to you, because you've given me more of an appreciation for what those things are doing. Ultimately, depending on where it is you're going with your particular setup, you're going to want something where you can monitor it. And it was interesting when you said you've not had a ppm meter in there, because that would have been for me conclusive. Yeah, because
we will do it.
I'm sure you will. Yeah. I think with everything in the horticultural industry, there is a lot of real knowledge. There's a lot of supposition. There's a lot of people who believe they've got evidence because they've had a good cycle or two. So they're going to tell you that this is why, when really it could have been something completely different, which was the reason. Because I find that the most important thing I see is that if you're going to, as a grower, learn from what it is you're doing, you're gonna have to be patient. If you go out and change your extraction, your food, and some other practice, well, you're not going to know if it was a combination of those changes or any individual change that brought you either your success or failure.
Exactly.
So you're going to have to be patient. You're going to have to change one thing per cycle.
Yes.
If you're in flower now, if you're in flower now, make notes. Get a little pen and a pad. Make sure you know what you did. Don't rely on your memory. Science is about learning. Science is about monitoring things, and science is it's the study of nature. Yes. So if you're studying something, you're going to have to note it and be methodical. And once you're doing that, you'll really know, was it that? And I used to have a client who ran a room with side-by-side systems. So he had one room, 2 systems in it. So he can really evaluate nutrients. He can really evaluate other changes that he makes, because they're in exactly the same environment. They're exactly the same genome.
Yes.
And now he can say, okay, well, this time I did this on this side and this on this side. And that's real knowledge.
Yeah.
Everything else, I just find it, I find that when you talked about good grow shops that you're mentioning at the start of the podcast, that's what a good grow shop is. Somewhere where people know, not where they reckon.
Yeah.
And if they don't know, say that. Yeah. Because that allows us, when you say you don't know, that triggers your brain to be able to go out and learn that. And now we know. Yeah. You're leading us out of the darkness.
Yeah. And on that point, so last week I said, I was very careful to say, we're talking about systems. I don't have a huge amount of experience with drippers or with the other method, NFT. Not a lot of experience that I would feel confident to sit here and just talk about those systems. It was DWC that we had a conversation about. Yeah. But I can answer questions on NFT. I can answer questions on drippers. So if people come in the shop, ask the question, I can answer it. But I'm very careful not to go into too deep or try and pretend that I know a lot.
Exactly.
But at the end of last week's podcast, I thought, I really do want to be able to, I want to know more, just because I don't use those systems. I want to understand those systems. So that's more learning for me. And we were talking just before the show, weren't we, that one of the best things that you can say is, I don't know.
It's a really powerful phrase.
Yeah.
A lot of people like to feel like it's an ego thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sometimes you want to appear as if you know, but I think that it's just the most powerful phrase when you say I don't know. That's what's led us where we are. The fact that humans are able to say that and then ask what and how and why. That's why we've got these phones in our pockets now.
That's why so I love reading books. It's like a hobby. I really enjoy it. And so when I'm reading books, I'm just taking the information and learning. And I think nowadays, because we have got this phone to hand, if anyone has a question, within 15 seconds, you've got the answer to every question.
You've got an answer, buddy.
You've got an answer.
You've got an answer. But my concern always is, I love Wikipedia. I think it's awesome. Yeah. I really do. But then I've seen misinformation on there. It's like any information you get from a human being. It's as fallible as they are.
Yeah.
And this is also the thing for me. An awesome grow shop, an awesome shop in any field is a place where those guys can tell you about either their experience or the experience of clients or whatever that's actually real.
Yeah.
And it leads to so much more than someone who's read something perhaps in a book, because like you said, books are awesome. We get so much from them, but your experience, that's right. Your experience is always, for me, it's more important.
Trumps everything.
It does. It does.
Because there's a lot of times when I have read as many books as I can about horticulture and about hydroponics. And when it comes to real life, quite often it's not the way that they've said it.
No.
And I hope I get the message across to everybody that listens to the podcast and everyone that watches that we are not a podcast, and there's no podcast on this planet that is you listen to it and they are the facts.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so we are not listen to us and we are right. It is listen to us. We bring a lot of experience. We bring a lot of learning. We bring passion for this industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you should not listen to what we say and take it as gospel. You should use what we say to trigger. Oh, okay. I didn't think about that. Let me go and do some more reading.
Exactly.
Let me go and do some more learning. Let me apply what you've said to my situation, see if it works for me. Because
Absolutely.
that's the difference. Every nutrient, every additive, every fan filter tent, they will do a job. What works brilliantly for me, and I could come on here and say everybody should be DWC, swerve everything else because DWC is the way to go. But then for an amount of people, it's going to be the worst thing that they could have done. So it's taken
horses for courses as well, isn't it?
That's
but there are some things that do make a difference, and the community is telling you anyway.
Yeah.
If you listen to those people who are out there, everyone knows who the good growers are. Everybody knows who the good horticulturalists are, just like in any field. And I think you can always learn from those guys who've just been at it forever.
Yeah.
And some people though they get lucky. They just sort of start and everything's working well for them, But I think this is a challenging thing to do. For someone like myself who's technical, it's a nightmare because I'm really good with machines. So I would say to you, have this sort of monitoring system in your room.
Yeah.
Have these things, because I've got a friend. He's actually a scouser as well.
Yeah.
And his favorite phrase is measuring is knowing.
Yeah.
And because everybody does like to have an opinion about what it is that's getting them where they want to be, but when you measure things and you consistently measure them, that goes back to the science, and you can say, well, yeah, this cycle, this went well because we were using these certain factors, and you actually know, you're not guessing. How was the air condition? What was the humidity like? How much CO2 was in the atmosphere at the time? When you're measuring these things, now you actually know, and you can see what's good and what isn't.
And writing it down and keeping a note of what's going on. So on these exhale bags, just to sort of wrap up I call it natural CO2, as if there's an unnatural form of CO2 out there. But
yeah, I did pull you up on that earlier. I was like, yeah.
I said, we're going to talk about natural CO2. And Jason turns around and goes, well, mine's not synthetic CO2, it's not like I made it in a lab somewhere. So the bags, I feel like the reason that people don't like them or say that the shit is because they're using them as they are being told to use them. Hang them up above the plant canopy because CO2 is heavy in there. It'll drop on the canopy and blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
So that's what the books will tell you. Real life says that your extraction will suck it straight out and you're left with nothing. So the bags of exhale CO2, they'll last 6 months. You use them in veg.
How much? Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's cool.
You did say that you saw those raise it up to approximately 800 ppm.
Yeah.
How far would you get with one of those, you reckon?
600, 650.
Okay.
And that is why I personally use it in veg, the earliest stage of veg, because when the plants don't need a lot of CO2.
Yeah. Then it's
awesome.
awesome.
It's a nice little...
Yeah, it's a little boost.
The air around us is 390 ppm CO2.
Well,
depending on where you are.
All right, let's get into that.
Okay.
Then. Well,
before you get into it, if anyone's listening outside, I could really do with a bottle of water if there's any chance of one of them.
Yeah,
two, please. or teas or coffee.
No, water's fine.
Thank you. So what's the air? What is CO2 in air?
Well, as you said, you can get readings on lots of the planet of around 390 ppm.
Yeah.
But really, I think that also changes depending on your location, whether you're in the city or not, etc. Or you're near the sea. There's all sorts of things going on. You aren't going to see more than around 400 ppm though. But the real consensus is, I'd say between 250, and 250 and 300 ppm. And your plants can take up to 5 times. They can take up to 5 times base level. Yeah. So those of you who believe that the average on Earth is around 250 ppm will be putting your ppm meters up to 1250 ppm. Those who think it's around 300, we should be putting it around 1500. But you shouldn't really be going above that anyway.
Okay, I'm glad you've said that, because that's what I currently believe to be true. No more than 1500.
No more than 1500. It can become counterproductive when you get over 2000.
Yeah.
So it'll actually slow certain processes down over 2000 ppm.
Slide that on over there because it was getting in the way.
So around that.
Okay. So we use the bags that have just slid over there in really early stages, and then I just leave it in there because there's no point in taking it out. Put it on the floor; it'll produce extra CO2, and the plants will use it. But some people will try and buy them when they're in flowering. I just think there's no point. It's just because it's not producing enough CO2 to really see the benefit. You're spending £30 on a bag of CO2. It'll last you 6 months.
That is long. I didn't know that they were anywhere near that.
Well, that's
long.
what they say. That's what they say.
I didn't know.
That's what we've been told.
I'd just love to get a ppm meter on them. We should just put it to bed.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
I'm only interested in knowing, like I said to you,
and measuring
it. So I don't want to disparage these products. They've been out for a long time. They're only going to still be on the shelf because people are using them and find some benefit to having them. So I don't know a lot about those because most of the people that I deal with have moved on from them. I think that they're
evolved.
Well, no, I'm like, I don't want to come across like that either, condescending. I feel like if they're working for you, grab them. Do what you got to do, because I know for a fact that CO2 is a supercharger for plants. So however you're getting it, I remember I had a friend about a decade ago who used to spray his plants with bottled water. That was, fizzy water, because he said it will get it, it'll give a bit of CO2 around him. And I'm like, well, if it works for you, mate.
Was that you being polite, was it?
I do try to, but I think if as we were just talking about, empirical evidence is empirical evidence. Okay. If you're using that and you find that it's a benefit to you, then you should continue to. And I think that it's a great idea to use a bit of that in veg.
Let's do the last natural CO2. Talking about bottled CO2. This is CO2 fusion. I was a little bit dubious of it when it first came out because it was like, it must be carbonated water, spraying it on it. And as you spray it onto the plants, it will produce carbon dioxide. Obviously dubious, but Highlight was stocking at the time.
Okay.
Peter,
I saw it I saw it in the summer for the first time. I did.
So that's for Instagram showing you there. YouTube, that's the bottle we're talking about. It's called CO2 Fusion, about to be rebranded soon for the new year.
Okay.
But because Peter, who was on 3 or 4 weeks ago with the Grow Genius podcast, I really respect him. He's just in the industry a long time, really knowledgeable person. He said he's used it and seen big differences from it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to give you the benefits of the doubt. Put it into the shop. First few customers took it, not much said, but it was gone. So we've got it back into the shop.
Okay.
The second set said, listen, I've used that and it's really good.
Wow.
I don't know whether it's the CO2 in there that's really
Or
good
some other
or
relative.
something else is in there. But it says, in Jurassic times, ferns were huge due to high atmospheric CO2 levels.
Yep.
Modern plants have evolved from these ferns to grow with lower CO2 levels. Spraying with CO2 fusion allows the plant leaves to reach the same level of CO2 saturation as in Jurassic times. So
that's more or less my spiel.
Yeah,
yeah. I agree with all the historic things in here. This is historically accurate.
Yeah.
So about 300 million years ago, when the Earth was more volcanic, there were the greenhouse gases. Same thing we're talking about now.
Yeah.
That CO2 warms the planet. So when the Earth was more volcanic, there was a lot more CO2 in the atmosphere, and the planet temperature was hotter. Which brings us to another aspect that people often ask about with CO2 is, can your plants run in rooms that are hotter that are infused with CO2? Short answer, yes.
Let's move on.
Yeah,
this is good because my default answer is if your room is hot, putting CO2 will allow the plants to cope.
Still metabolize and deal with it.
Is that correct?
Yes, it is, because the same thing that they're saying there is true in the Jurassic era, or just whenever the Earth was old. The plants were here before us 300 million years ago. So at that time, the actual atmospheric CO2 was at 1,500 and sometimes higher.
Yeah.
So the plants, when they evolved to take CO2 up at that rate, which is why when we infuse the rooms with CO2, the plants grow better. Literally, you guys are NPK. NPK and CO2 is a marriage made in heaven. So to be able to take up and use nutrients at their optimum level, you need CO2.
Yeah.
That's what, I've seen many a horticulturalist who's got his room awesome. He's got the best light, humidity, temperature, newts, all those aspects of his room are optimal. And he's just like, they're just not really popping. And then you add that CO2 and those plants can really metabolize and work with it. And all of a sudden he sees just dramatic differences. And I know that you mentioned that, if you put like this, I've never met a grower who's used CO2 who decided they didn't want to use it.
Yeah, that didn't work for me.
No, I'm never doing that again. Right. That's not the way it goes. We used to say supercharge your grow.
Yeah.
Now we just say increase quality, because that's the other thing about CO2. When your plant's got CO2 there, it's got the potential that every day is a good day. And if you had, because when you look at the market, the products that you sell, the technology's moved on. People are so much more knowledgeable about what they can give their plants and when.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, well, what's your limiting factor, if there is any?
Yeah.
You've got this optimal nutrient, but your plant can't necessarily absorb it without the CO2.
Yeah.
Now you've got it there. They can run at a high rate, and you'll watch explosive growth, triffids in your grow space. You'll see the kind of plants, the kind of strength, the kind of vigor that you don't see without it.
Okay. What will people see if so people who are not using any CO2 and they're just relying on natural air, which is absolutely fine.
It's fine.
You still get good results with
Yeah,
your natural CO2. But if they're not pumping in air, they haven't got any air intake, what would they expect to see if they didn't have CO2? Like with nitrogen, a lack of nitrogen, you get yellowing leaves. Is there anything that you'd see with a lack of CO2, or would it literally just be they're just not growing as quick?
They're just not growing as quick. That's what I'd say. I wouldn't say that, you're going to see some deficiency as a result of not having them there. But I would say that the converse might be true, that certain deficiencies won't be there when the CO2's there, because the plants can take it up. When we were talking before about DWC, I find DWC a fascinating and really powerful way of growing. One of the things I was going to ask you about when you said you had your rooms with the CO2 grow bags on the floor, I always advised people that I had concerns about CO2 being pumped in to the nutrient solution.
Yeah,
because you're trying to oxygenate the root zone. So you want your pumps to be outside the room and bringing in fresh air to the root zone. You don't really want highly infused air with CO2, in my view, at the root zone. I'd have concerns about it. Although, obviously, some people with fish tanks and etc. use CO2 at the underwater as well.
See fish.
Yeah,
that's just another level of hobbyist.
Yes, it is.
Shit going on, because it's like technical stuff and growing fish with real coral. Yes. So coral needing CO2 and fish wanting oxygen. I don't even want to get into that. But you're spot on with the DWC, especially if you're using proper bottled CO2, then you can regulate and you can push your plants to max 1200, 1400, 1500 ppm. If you're in a closed room and you're using a bubbler, if your air pumps are sucking in, so that CO2 is dropping to the floor, the air pumps are sucking it in and pumping it into the water. If it dissolves into the water, it becomes carbonic acid, and that will drop your pH massively. So if people see the pH dropping, it's because they've got high levels of CO2 in there. And the easiest way to avoid that is have your pumps outside of the room. Even if it's like drilled hole through walls, or just something that you can come up with to not have those pumps sucking in the air that you're trying to give to your plants.
It's interesting you said that, because maybe you can elevate the pumps.
That's another method.
That might help, because it's definitely
right
going
at the very top of the.
But then I suppose you're pumping warm air in at the root zone, so I suppose you could be causing another problem. But if you're using DWC, you should be using a chiller.
Exactly, and that'll counteract it.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
If you can't get out the room, go up in the room. CO2 will be the least concentrated space, and that's a very good point. So before we move on, I did say I would try and stay on top of the comments. Got a few people watching on YouTube, so hopefully that answered your question about the shitty bags. And if you didn't see a result, move on and find something that works for you. Someone said that's what's in the TMB, which is the sugar, the yeast, the carbon particles. Health as well said, is CO2 dangerous? Good question.
Yes, it's an asphyxiant, so it means it will choke you out. When guys are sitting in the garage with the door closed and the engine running, it's the CO2 in the exhaust fumes that kills them.
Yeah.
So if you locked yourself in a room with that bottle and opened it, then you'd be in trouble. So yes, but humans can be in high concentrations for long periods of time, like 8,000 ppm. Yeah. So the guys who work bottling it and in other parts of manufacturing where it's produced, they can work in there. Well, there's health and safety guidelines really just tell them how long they can be in there. But you can be in 4,000 ppm for, I think it's about 5 to 8 hours, like a full day at 4,000 ppm.
How would you feel? Would you get headachy and lethargic?
Well, I was about to say, the first thing you'd notice if you was in a room where the concentration of CO2 is too high is an unusually sweet taste in your mouth.
Okay.
Then a pounding headache, then drowsiness, and then a sleep from which you will never wake. so
we like to keep this podcast light and airy.
Airy being the
proper air.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So but to be honest with you, it's dangerous if
you're silly with it.
I was going to say if you're if you've got challenges with your learning, then don't use it. But if you've got common sense, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's perfectly safe. It's around you now. It's in every pint we're going to drink later. The CO2 is around you. It's everywhere. It's perfectly safe. As long as you don't get it to ridiculous high levels, and you've got a long time. That what I said about the sweet taste, the headache, the drowsiness.
You'll know.
It's going to take you an hour or two to get into that state, unless you put your lips on the bottle. In which case, you're going to have another problem anyway.
Somebody's actually told me you love CO2 that much. You have had your lips
the warning.
on the bottle.
The warning label is on there because I do say, don't suck it from the bottle. It's I think it's about minus 200 degrees or something in there, and minus 60 boils. So it will give you 3rd-degree burns if you open the canister straight on yourself or whatever.
Yeah, that's mad. And that's compressed.
Just compressed gas. Yeah, it's not that. It's at 50 bar at this sort of room temperature as well. It's not. It's not as It's like a tire on your car.
Okay, on that point, then you said at this temperature.
That's right.
So what happens if it goes really? If someone stores it and it's like 1 or 2 degrees, or if your room gets to like 32, 33.
Oh no, nothing like that. If you heated that bottle to, and I'm going to fudge the figures here. I'd say if you heated that to about 80 degrees, then there's a little silver safety valve at the back that pops out.
Yeah.
So literally, if there was a fire in your room, that would expose the valve to the temperature it needs to pop.
Yeah.
It will blow, release all the CO2 in the room, which would actually slow your fire because CO2 is what's in fire extinguishers as well.
Yeah. Because
it chokes the fire out. It just removes the oxygen.
So it's a safety mechanism as
it's
well.
It's also a safety mechanism. And there's another aspect. We used to supply, and we still can get them, little 2 kilo cylinders of that. If you've got a room that's got certain pests in it, if you raise the ppm to like 16,000 ppm for a good few hours, you'd give spider mites a run for their money.
Yeah, is that what it's got to be at 16,000?
16,000.
Okay, because I was about to ask that question.
Yeah, you'd want to let in a room this size, you'd probably want to let a bottle off like that, turn the fans off, and let it build up, and they're having a bad day.
Yeah. So then this room's 4 meters by 5 meters, and that's a 5 kilo weight bottle of CO2. You'd basically run that.
open it and leave.
Okay.
And
what would and that's not going to do anything harmful to the plants?
Oh, the girls would. Sorry, the plants would love it. The plants would they're absolutely fine with that.
Yeah.
Obviously, as I said, if you run your room at over 2,000, I'd say 2 ppm for long periods, that's going to be a problem. But a blast of CO2 isn't going to hurt the plants.
Okay. With running CO2 at higher levels, is there a need to increase the amount of light that you're giving the plants?
I wouldn't say there's a need to, but you can.
Yeah.
So, the last time I was reading about this, I remember someone saying something like 900 watts per square meter was the maximum that you could that the average plant can take.
Yeah.
So I would have said that sometimes, with certain biomass, they don't like it to be very light.
Yeah.
You may increase that plant's tolerance to light with CO2 as well.
Okay. So it increased its tolerance to light and increased the tolerance to heat.
Heat's the biggest one. I think in the summer, a lot of people who don't always use CO2 will invest in bags and bottles and cylinders to help counteract the effects of summer.
Could you think of it a little bit like sun cream for the plants?
In a way. And the thing is, uncharacteristically, the last few years we've had some summers where mid-30s are normal.
Yeah.
And that can be devastating for certain growers. So it is good to get a bit of CO2 in there, and it will help you out.
Okay, so let's have another look. So someone that says, what about the US? Have we got any potential for the US in the near future for your products?
I'm not sure about that. We did get inquiries from Europe, so we did start looking at it. It's it's a dangerous. It comes under dangerous chemicals.
Yeah.
So,
because of the shipping and
yeah,
if you air freight it, it's the different pressures.
Exactly, air freight. You're right, but even to ship it to the continent, you have to have certain documentation. I'm sure I'm sure that will change when we leave the EU.
Yeah.
But there's the documentation about that. We've not really looked at the United States. If I'm honest with you, we've not looked at that.
I know that before you get to the US, you've probably got friends out there or contacts.
Yes.
So on the next podcast, we'll do a bit of research and we'll give our American listeners some good contacts to get in touch with.
Absolutely.
So Jema Aiden said, when mycelium respire, you will also get ethylene released. This will lead to leaf and flower abscission. Jema Aiden's like on the ball with his fucking really vocabulary here.
Awesome.
I didn't actually know that about ethylene. So ethylene is, I think it's classed as a hormone. And when ethylene's released, it's what ripens bananas.
Okay.
And if you have it's like what's that old saying? A rotten apple will spoil a bunch. Or rotten banana will spoil a bunch. It's because certain fruits produce ethylene, and as they ripen, they're essentially telling all the other fruits around it, it's time to ripen. Let's go, motherfuckers. But I didn't know that about mycelium. I'm going to definitely look into that. But he then went on to say this will lead to leaf and flower abscission, which is for everyone else who's not a nerd like me and loves all this shitty science. Your leaves will drop off because the plant's basically saying it's time to go. Yeah. I'll definitely look into that. Thank you very much. He's also said, I'm going to be looking out for these comments now. The amount of CO2 released by those bottles compared to the likes of the canisters is not even comparable. Can't disagree with you there.
Yeah.
And we're going to go on to the benefits of using these bottles in open rooms and closed rooms. Can you hear that rain?
Yes.
Whoa, that is heavy rain to be picked up by these mics.
Yeah. Because I wondered what that was. I was like, they're hissing.
No,
but now I'm getting that.
That's the rain. What other comments have we got? He's getting controversial now. He said more CO2 is released by keeping a pet hamster in your room than exhale.
Oh, that's cold. That's cold.
Are you agreeing or disagreeing?
What I would say is
hamster on a wheel.
A hamster on a wheel could be grafting. Let's be clear. That could be some graft. But what I would say is definitely me and you doing the amount of gassing we're doing now, we could easily raise this room to 1500 ppm.
I'm starting to get that sweet taste. I don't know if it's because Aim has said abscission. It's got me like, oh, science. Oh, it could be the extra CO2. Oh, have we done an hour already? Shit.
Oh, you knew that was going to happen.
I know. What time is it? 5:15?
Nearly quarter past. Yeah, nearly quarter past. I don't think we've covered half the stuff.
You haven't covered 10%. I'm like still on the intro. Shit. Indica Head Shop says, this is why this is the best podcast with real world information. Thank you very much, Indica. I appreciate that. He said, when's the best time to add a PK booster in your opinion? Dead quick. That absolutely depends on the PK booster that you're using. But generally, it's in from week 3 of flower to about a week before the end. Tweedledee said, if you lit a match, let it go out. One of them a day that's enough for some CO2. Probably not, no.
But there's a reason that when they used to say back in the day, talk to your plants, it does. If you literally are working in your room, I've seen it with ppm meters that, you know, if you were setting your room up, for instance, because you're
energetic,
you're going to be producing that. You know, you could get a room this size up to 1000 ppm really easy.
Yeah. If all the doors are shut and
as we are now, I'll be very surprised. I should have bought a ppm meter with me so I could show you.
Have you ever been to Spannabis in Barcelona?
I haven't. I wanted to go.
Are you going to come this year? Or
when is it? Well, it's early next year, isn't it?
Yeah,
I'd love to.
It'd be good to see it out there. Somebody actually took a CO2 meter. I think it was Andy from Dutch Garden Supplies. Okay. He took a CO2 meter with him to Spannabis, and don't quote me on these figures. I think it was looking at like the 1600 ppm.
That's completely plausible.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And he was feeling tired and a little bit headachy.
I think that's probably got something to do with what else he might have been doing. Because 1600 ppm, you wouldn't notice it. If you're in your bedroom tonight and there's you and your missus in there sleeping, you may well get it up.
Sleeping. It's a clean show.
Yeah, I did say that. Then
how much CO2 do you release when you do the other? Have you measured
a bit
that?
more? No.
Jason's
I'm
like,
busy.
Jason's like, hold on a minute, love. Let me get the meter out.
No.
You're not that invested in CO2.
No, I'm not. No, I love CO2, but not that much, you know.
So that's one of the Operation Grow. Great. They do a show on a Saturday at 9:00. Okay. Educating people on. So basically, the Operation Grow uses the PL Grow system monitor. It'll do temperature, humidity. I think there will be an option to do CO2 in the future. And they do a show, look at all the different growers, measuring what temperatures, what humidities they run at, and specifically what VPDs and the different effects that it's having on their plants, growing the same plants as well. He's asked the question, is there an optimal VPD for CO2 uptake?
Not that I'm aware of. So you might be the one to educate us on that. The only machine that I was aware of, I'm not here to plug or disparage anyone's product, but the only machine that I am aware of that even measures that is the Dimlux. Yeah. They've got their VPD camera. Yeah. That now a horticulturalist did say to me that the Dimlux system, for those who know and don't know, connects lights. It has it can run one unit can run 160 lamps. It'll do your humidity, temperature, because it can run fans for you. And of course it's got a CO2 sniffer, and so to monitor, and it will actually release the gas using, because we haven't talked about that as well. That bottle isn't all you need. You need an actuated regulator. Yeah. It's a solenoid. Basically, you screw it on, and it will release the gas in coordination with your controller. You'll set your controller. I'll have 1250 ppm, please, and it will just automatically switch the valve on and off. Okay, and release the gas into the air. So it's important. It's important to monitor and to measure all of this stuff. Yeah. But the Dimlux, I was told that it will lower the CO2 level if it needs to, beyond what you've set it based on the VPD camera. So it's probably worth it that your listener should have a look at that, and have a look at what the Dimlux does, because as I said, I've been told it does adjust that as well, because the Dimlux, its real application is for dimming your lights when your temperature goes out, because that seems to be the biggest thing. Yeah. But that VPD camera, which measures the transpiration rates and all of that, that does dim and manage the lights according to that. And I've been told it does lower and raise the CO2 based on that as well. Very
nice. The Dimlux, good units, expensive though. The next notch down for people that don't want to invest in Dimlux quality would be Ecotechnics.
I love Ecotechnics. I wouldn't even say it's lower quality. I can't countenance that statement. I can't agree with you. The Ecotechnics stuff is awesome. Yeah. It's British made. Yeah. All right. Let's keep it real.
Put our Brexit cards on the table.
That's right. It's made in the UK by someone in the UK who understands what it is you need and who's been at it for donkeys,
a long time.
So I've always been a real fan of the Ecotechnics products.
So go on to Google, go on to our online shop, type in Ecotechnics. You can find the monitors, the regulators, the valves, everything that you need to attach to this beautiful, very light bottle. Barry won't be hitting his back picking this up. It's very light. And everything you need to attach there. So hopefully that.
If I could, I know we've not got much time. No, let's. I wanted to stick on one other point because you mentioned it earlier. When you talked about closed and open rooms.
Yes.
So, being as we just mentioned Ecotechnics, that's what's reminded me about that. Okay. The Ecotechnics has got an Ecotechnics product called the Unis. Yeah. it's like the cheaper end of their range. You can tell me what it retails at, but if I remember, it's you get a lot of change out of 200 quid.
Yes.
It's a timed release. So what it does is it doesn't measure the ppm in your room. He's designed the product cleverly to just work based on the amount of cubic meterage in the area. So as you just said, this room's probably 5 by 4, which is 20 square meters, and it's probably 2.4 meters high. So you're looking at around a 4850 cubic meters of air.
Yeah.
And you would just program that in, and it will release CO2 off a bottle like this periodically. And I found that works well for people in open room scenarios, because if they were using a ppm monitor in an open room, if the extraction's on powerfully, then it's just going to be, you're just basically going to open the bottle and empty it.
Yeah.
With the Unis, you get the option of still being able to get some CO2 in your room, but doing that periodic release means that you can get the efficacy of it, but without just burning it straight out the filter.
And that's the biggest problem people have been having in open room systems. It's a no-brainer. Closed room systems, you need CO2. You just can't operate without them. We're going to do a closed room podcast in the new year for people that want to run closed room systems. I'm going to get a guest on because I need to know more. So I want to get a proper professional on that's going to talk to me about closed room.
The open room systems, candidly, use bottled CO2 by all means. But if you've got an open room system and you've got a little bit of headroom, meaning the amount of heat that you generate there, if you've got headroom there, buy a propane burner.
Okay.
Buy a propane burner. Be careful with it.
Yeah.
Because you've got gas and a flame and all that. But depending on your particular environmental situation, by all means, a propane burner, it produces CO2 and water as it burns propane. And, that would be a cheaper way for you to get higher levels that you don't mind going out of the filter.
Yeah.
But as I say, it's not for everyone. As I said, it's bottled gas.
Into.
It's bottled gas. It's flammable. So you've got to take those considerations into consideration. Okay. But it is out there.
I'm absolutely devastated that it is 5:20. Like, genuinely devastated. Let's just see what Operation Grow is saying. I guess the issue is going to be a very high VPD. The stomata will close and reduce the uptake of CO2. Could be why Dimlux will maybe push an extra CO2 into the room to get maybe more CO2. Or on the opposite,
I think it probably backs
you're
off.
Lowering it because they know the plant's not going to uptake it.
Exactly. If the stomata are closed, there isn't any point in infusing the room with CO2. On that note, I advise people the last half an hour,
turn it off.
Turn it off.
Yeah, just before the lights go off, get it off.
Depending on exactly what it is you're growing, maybe the last half a week of your cycle, you don't need it either.
Okay.
It'll have done its work by then.
Yeah, man. Good information. I love all that. Last one by Operation Grow is, so if you're going to run your room hotter due to the added CO2, you need to keep the relative humidity in check to go with the increases in temperature.
With that.
Yeah, man. Good points. Instagram, let's see if there's any content. What's the product you're talking about? Just joined late. That's Carl from OG Seeds. So we're talking about a phone that falls off its monitor before you finish the podcast. Just for everyone that's joined, and also on YouTube.
Come on, pick the light one up. Pick the empty one up.
I'll pick the full one up. I'm going to pick the full one up. I've been training. One left hand. There. 5 kilos of pure CO2.
Food grade CO2, because that's important
CO2.
As well.
And I just picked it up with my left hand, which, believe it or not, this is me weak arm. I know I look like I've been doing a lot of work now. But that's the big selling point of this. Also, Jason's just a don of CO2. And like I said, I'm absolutely devastated that it's like nearly 5:30. And I know people finish work and go home, and I have to try and keep it under 3 hours, which is a pain. But that's what we're talking about. But left hand again on the floor. Right. You are definitely. Can you come back in January?
I believe so.
Or February. We'll rearrange it because
why
we've
not?
got other products that Titchmarsh do. They do fire safety products, which is very similar to the Mabo. So it's the blue thing. But
Well, the Mabo was a liquid. What's different about Saviour, it's called. And it's not your Lord and Saviour, but it's
It could be.
Yeah.
Okay. So a bit scouse in there, it's going to save you.
It's basically a gas. So what that does is it means that can disperse in a room like this. And it's a special gas that is drawn to heat. So it will literally be attracted by the flame, go over there and choke it out.
Yeah, like a UFC fighter.
Exactly.
Like Khabib Nurmagomedov against Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor's trying to burn your room out. Khabib comes over, chokes him out.
I love McGregor, man. But yeah, so that's how that works. And why we looked at that, as I said, we're really conscious of the industry that we're trying to serve. And what we're looking for was something that was non-toxic, something that would leave your room intact.
Yeah.
So it isn't a liquid. It isn't going to spread itself everywhere, ruin your kit and your crop. This is something that will just get to the source of the problem and get rid of it.
Nice.
And, that's
its job.
That's right.
So we've still got a lot to talk about. There was whole stuff about the industry and people having a lack of knowledge, but coming across as though they know it all, how to be wary of people who say that they know it all. We hold our hands up because we do not know it all. We have barely scratched the surface. We're always learning. The people watching teach me every week.
Everybody knows something you don't know anyway. That's the way the world is.
That's a great point to finish on. There's every single person in this world. There's 7 billion. You can learn one thing from
everyone.
Everybody, and whether they are a billionaire business owner, whether they are your average Joe, or whether they are anybody in this world, they can teach you one thing. And if you approach people and deal with people as if you can learn one thing from them that will help you, then you start treating people a lot nicer, don't you?
That's a good way of looking at it.
So there's been a good few. This has been a good podcast. It was 22 people watching at any one time. Everyone on Instagram, thank you very much for joining. This has been podcast 199. We're going to do this all over again because I knew you'd be good at podcasts.
Thanks for having me.
Thank
really
you for coming
it.
from Cardiff. I thought you made the very small journey from
Birmingham. No,
that was
less than halfway. That was, yeah.
Thank you very much for joining. So, have you got any social media you need to tell them about?
To be honest with you, our social media has been on pause. On social media, we were sort of we had a bit of an alias.
Yeah.
So we were Grow Gas.
Okay.
And so those people who've seen Grow Gas, if you go on like the Hydro Bros, who's a favourite shop of mine down in London, down in Croydon, you can get links to us from over there as well.
Okay. But on the website? On the website,
titchmarsh.co, you can get in touch with us there. We'll make sure you get what you need, when you need it, where you need it.
Love that. Shops, get in touch with titchmarsh.co to stock it. And any suppliers as well. I think Jason's up for a conversation. Yes or no?
There's absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You can distribute this in your area. We've got a network of people that do that.
Okay.
But absolutely, this is where the shame about CO2 in this industry is really no one's on it. I'm not saying that, no disrespect to the exhale and all that, but really it's such a fundamental building block of your plant that if people want to understand why the quality of the quality of what it is that they're growing isn't where it could be, it's your gas.
Yeah.
Get the CO2 in and see, how well you can drive the genetics.
Yeah, man.
This is how you're going to find out what you're capable of, and that's why it's such a shame in the industry that everyone's just
mess about a little bit.
Yeah, but
maybe.
You know why that is as well? Some of the larger suppliers who weren't interested in horticulture, weren't interested in grow shops and all that.
Yeah.
And that's why I thought, no, they're the very people that need it the most. And not everybody wants contracts with companies that charge you rent on the cylinders, because you know all about that.
Yes.
That the likes of BOC and that they don't want their bottles sitting there empty for 6 months, so they charge you rent on it. And we were just like, people just need to be able to get the thing hassle free when and where they want it. We do have some operations where we drop ship as well. For those of you who are serious about needing it and using it, we drop ship to you as well, and we can even drop ship on behalf of the shops. So you can go in there, order it there, and have it arrive at your place, or at your nan's, or wherever it is.
We haven't even scratched the surface of how you're going to change the CO2 game, because I do think you are. No more heavy bottles, and let's start doing CO2 seriously.
Yeah.
So, and that will be the next podcast. Start taking CO2 seriously. We'll do that in January, February sometime, and I'm going to get you back on. And you'd be an absolute legend on the podcast. No worries. Everyone watching on YouTube, thank you very much for joining again. Next week, it will be...
Oh, you can just play this again. Don't worry.
Well, I think I will play this twice. It needs to be played twice.
Play it again.
So next week, I don't know what's happening next week, because we're in a bit... So Sunday's podcast is Jason from AutoPot live from Colombia. The week after that is going to be this podcast that you're listening to. And then the next podcast that we do is going to be podcast 200.
Ooh, milestone.
You need to watch. You need to watch. And you all need to listen to podcast 200. Awesome. You don't even know who we've got coming on. Oh, it's a surprise.
Excellent.
Thank you very much for tuning in. There's been podcast 199 with myself, Stephen, and my absolute legend of a guest, Jason. I knew he'd be brilliant. And we're that good, we'll have him back again. See you all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.